Hey Reefers! Today I thought I'd talk about the Apex and show you how I use it and some of the features that I like. Here's a look at the 75-gallon SBS tank real quick. Thought I'd do this video a little freestyle, mix it up a little bit. So one of the first things that I have programmed down here was a feed cycle for all my tanks, because I like to feed my fish with all the pumps and stuff off, so all the food doesn't go down the drain that they don't eat right away. So here's all my pump controllers and my skimmer controller. And then I also have two other tanks that are on it as well. I have this frag tank here that I just added a dose to yesterday. My alkalinity was starting to creep down a little bit. That was in one of my last videos, if you haven't seen it, on Hannah Checkers. That's the control board for the Apex. That's the second control board actually. That's for these two tanks. There's the other frag tank. They're both full right now. But same thing on these tanks. I like to turn the flow off, and obviously all the skimmers and everything, so they don't overflow and make a mess in the sumps. So the way I do that is I have that Amazon Echo Dot, and you could do it on your phone too manually. You can hit a little button and start a feed cycle. But one thing that I do is that my hands are usually full enough. Here's the control board, the main control board for the Apex. Kind of messy right now, but when I want to start my feed cycle, I just say, Alexa, feed the fish.
Coffee looks so hungry. Give him a big piece. Starting feed cycle A.
And then it turns all the pumps off for me, except for Puffy's tank. I don't have his hooked up yet because they eat pretty quickly. But it just turned off all the pumps. See, this whole board is off now. So it turned off all three tanks at one time. So now I can go and feed all my fish and not have to go around and hit all these little buttons for all these return pumps and skimmers and wave makers. I have it all programmed, and it's voice control now. And what it's doing now is it's counting down the timer that I set. I think I set the timer for about 10 or 15 minutes, and it'll count down from the timer. And I have it programmed so it'll turn the return pumps on first. It'll wait 2 minutes, and then it'll turn the skimmer on so I don't overflow the skimmer again while I'm coming back up in flow. And then it'll turn the wave makers on. So you'll excuse me, I'll feed the fish real quick and we'll get back to the video. Okay, now that the fish are fed, I'd like to show you another feature that I like. When I'm doing water changes, I can also turn off each individual tank, and I just set it for a longer timer. And that way I can just go around and do my water changes and the other tanks can still run. Like I said, I still got to get that hooked up to Puffy's tank yet. But for instance, on this tank, say I wanted to do a water change right now, I can also do it on my phone, but I just happen to have it on the Echo Dot because I like the hands-free. I just say, Alexa, turn off main tank.
Feed cycle C.
And then it'll start feed cycle C, which is the feed cycle I programmed for this tank to do a longer feed cycle. So that way I can do my water change and I won't have to worry about the pumps turning on while I'm in the middle of it. And the same thing as the feed cycle. When I was feeding the fish, it turns off all the pumps and the skimmer on this, and then when I cancel the feed cycle, it'll turn them on in the correct order too, so I won't overflow my skimmer. And then if you come over here, you'll notice these tanks are still running. So that way I don't have to turn them all off at once, because it's not necessary if I'm just doing a water change on one. So that's another neat feature that I like. It's still sort of the same thing. It's just you can do it for different feed cycles. You get 4 feed cycles with the Apex, and you can only do one at a time. So if you wanted to turn off another tank, you just have to do it manually in Fusion. You can manually turn off the outlets for your pumps if you wanted to turn off 2 tanks at once, or you could just program it. If you wanted to do 2, just program 2 on 1 feed cycle. But it would not do 2 feed cycles at once. It'll just do 1 feed cycle at a time. So you'll have to cancel 1 feed cycle and do the other one if you want to do 2 feed cycles. So then in order to turn this back on, I'll say, Alexa, turn on main tank.
Stop the feed cycle, see.
So just stop the feed cycle. And it turned the return pump on. Notice how the other 3 controllers are not on. One's for the skimmer and the other 2 are for the gyres. Yeah, that's really handy, and I like the voice control because I don't have to sit there and get out my phone. Usually I got my water container and hoses, and my hands get wet, so it's real nice to have a voice control with the AquaDot. Like I said, I'll probably work on the Google one too, but you don't have to if you don't want to. You can still use it off your phone. Another feature that makes reefing easier for me is this Trident. The Trident tests alkalinity, calcium, and magnesium. On an SBS tank, such as a 75-gallon SBS tank, it is very important to keep your alkalinity in check, and this allows me to do it so I don't have to manually test my water parameters every day. This will do it for me. The least it'll come pre-programmed to test per day is alkalinity 4 times a day and calcium and magnesium twice a day. And that does use quite a bit of reagent, but you can test more if you want. And you can even test less. There are ways to customize this, and I'll leave a link in the description. Whereas I test alkalinity twice a day, once in the morning and once in the afternoon, and I test magnesium and calcium once a day in the afternoon. So there are ways to customize this if you choose to. But as far as this SBS tank, it would be very difficult for me keeping up with all my other tanks and this tank and have the same success without this Trident. So this Trident is a lifesaver for me. The next feature I'd like to talk about is a dose. This is a 2-head dosing unit, and you can use it to dose 2-part if you want, such as I do here. You can use it for automatic water changes. You can pretty much dose whatever you want. I happen to like this because it does microdosing down to 0.1 milliliters, but it can also go a lot higher than that, obviously. It just seems to control the pH swings and the alkalinity swings better than the Jabo doser that I had. So I just happen to like this doser a lot better. Another feature that I like is I can just sit in my chair, and if I want to know what the status of my tanks are, I can just ask the AquaDot, and it'll tell me through the Fusion app what the status of my tanks are based on what I pre-programmed. So the AquaDot is required for this, and maybe it'll do it in the Google one too. But it's just a neat little feature that I like. The way to use it is I just say, Alexa, status.
The temperature probe name temp is 78.3 degrees. The temperature probe name temp 2 is 77.8 degrees. The temperature probe name temp 3 is 78.6 degrees. The pH probe named pH is 8.29. The pH probe named pH 2 is 7.82. The pH probe named pH 3 is 8.16. Alkalinity is 8.74 DKH. Calcium is 468 parts per million. And magnesium is 1,388 parts per million.
And that just gives you a brief overview of your tanks. If your hands are full and you're busy, I just happen to like this feature. Another feature that I'd like to talk about is alarms. I like the alarms because it notifies me if something's wrong. And you can also set up custom alarms. I happen to have one for Mondays that comes on at 4 o'clock, and it reminds me to check my dosing containers, and then it turns off at 4:01. So I'll see that notification still on the push notifications on my phone. And I also have this buzzer on my control board if I don't have my phone handy, or if I'm upstairs not really paying attention to my phone. If my temperatures get too high or too low, this alarm will kick on. I got it off of Amazon, and it runs off the 24-volt circuit. So here's what happens if my temperature gets too high or too low. And that's loud enough to where I can hear it upstairs, and at least somebody in the house will know something's wrong. There's other alarms that you can program for a lot of things on this, but that's just something simple, and it was cheap, that I like to use. The next feature that I'd like to talk about is individual outlets. You can go through in your Fusion app, and any outlets you have on your EB8s, or maybe even your EB4, you can turn on and off through the Fusion app. So if you just want one thing turned off, like I can turn off the wave maker here on the new frag tank if I want. Just hit off, and now that wave maker is turned off. That's just a neat feature I like if I just want to work on one thing. Like say I just want to take that wave maker out, or I want to move it or something. I don't have to unplug anything. I can just turn it off, and everything else will stay the way it is. You just got to remember to put it back to auto if you have feed cycles, because if you put it onto on, it'll just stay on and it won't turn off when you have your feed cycles going. But this is a feature that I like a lot too. It does require obviously using your phone, but you can hook it up to the Echo Dot as well and give these nicknames, and then you nickname it in the Echo Dot, and that way you can say you know, the turn off whatever, and it'll turn it off through voice controls as well. Up next is power monitoring. I don't use this feature a lot, but it is pretty handy. These are my two EB832 outlets, and as you can see, it tells you what your wattage and your amps and your volts are. So just looking at that alone is handy. It tells you what your incoming voltage is and how many amps and watts you're using. So I could tell by this one down here that my heater is on, because I don't have my lights running through the EB8s. I save those outlets for other things, but it gives you a breakdown of what's using what, and you can put in how much your electricity costs, and it'll give you an estimate of how much your equipment costs you to run. You know, if you want to know. But this is also handy because, say like for instance this return 3, it says 16 watts. You can also put alarms on it. Sorry about the focus there. To notify you that if the wattage drops, say a snail or something gets in there and the wattage drops or it goes up or something goofy goes on and there's a problem, you can set it up so it'll notify you on your phone. That way you know there's something wrong with it, rather than catching it later when it actually breaks. So this is a feature that I like to use every once in a while as well, but it is pretty handy. Up next is graphing. So in your Fusion app, they give you a lot of graphs, and if you don't have the Apex and you look at all this, it looks real confusing, and you're like, yeah, I'm not a rocket scientist here, what's all this stuff? After a while, it took me a couple months to figure everything out. You learn how to use it. This just gives you graphs of your history of your readings. Like here's the top one is my alkalinity for the 75-gallon SBS tank. And if you click on that, it just shows you a point in the graph, and it'll bring it up in the time period that you select. And it'll tell you what your alkalinity was according to your Trident for those given days. That's just one of the graphs that it gives you. There's also other graphs in here. Well, I better put my alarm back on auto real quick. There we go. Yeah, if you leave it off, it'll just stay off. The other graphs here are my pH graphs. The first one is for the 75-gallon SBS tank. The second one, the lower one, that's for the ZOA LPS frag tank. And number 3 here is the one I just put a dose on the other day. That's for the LPS and SPS frag tank. And then you have your temperature graphs too, which are nice to look at. You can see your temperature swings. And the same thing, you can tap on those and it gives you a point in time, and you can see what your temperature is throughout the day. Like when your lights kick on, more than likely your temperature is going to go up. When the lights turn off, your temperature is going to go down. And so the graphing just gives you a nice historical data of your tanks, so you can learn from it and know what moves you need to make, if you need to make any. And the last thing I want to talk about is custom notifications. Where you can make those at is this tab here. Go under alarms. And then under this email alarm 15 here, don't let the email part throw you off. That's for your push notifications. This is where you can put custom ones in. So the first one that I have programmed in here is just on Mondays at 4 o'clock to 4:01, I'll get a notification on my phone. And that will stay on there, and it won't go away on my phone. It'll stay on there. That's to remind me to check my dosing containers, because I don't have level sensors on my dosing containers. I just use cheap dollar store containers. So this works for me. Just lets me, say, hey, check your containers. The next one is for the Trident. If for some reason the Trident can't test whether the reagent's empty or there's a problem, this will give me a notification on my phone, because this will not happen on its own. It's not part of the programming, so you have to put a custom code in to get a notification about your Trident. Otherwise, the only time you'll see it is in the Fusion app, and it'll say something along the lines of test failed or reagent empty, but it will not give you a notification unless you put this code in this folder here. So these are just two little handy notifications that I like to use, and they work pretty well. Well, that'll do it for this video. And if you would do me a favor, if you enjoy these videos, please consider liking and subscribing. That'll let me know that you like watching them and I can make more. So this is Reefer Matt saying thank you for watching and happy reefing.